Going back to the other. Okay, again, I'm hoping within the next month or so here, this GoToMeeting will actually be switching to GoToWebinar, so I can get more attendees in the sessions. So, last one in, you made it. You guys are in the club now. All right. So, all right, welcome. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go over the ShopBot 3 software, and it's going to be nice because I've actually got a webcam over our desktop machine, and we'll be able to see the control console on the computer as well as the webcam. So some of you right now, if you can't see your webcam, I'm going to bring up this quick little video here I just filmed with Snagit showing, oh, here it is. Notice there's no, you can't see this camcorder because your thing might be over it. There's your camcorder. Grab right in the middle. Okay, so just to put that out there to show you. Yeah, I know that volume was gone, so I was trying to talk over. So that's what's going on. It'd be nice for you to have both. If not, I've got it here as an in picture. It's just going to be a little bit smaller as far as on the screen. So, all right. Well, a lot of us, when we first download our software from ShopBot, we get a PartWorks and a PartWorks 3D. And these are our two drawing softwares. And this is, what most of us spend most of our time in, is drawing and designing here. But there really is a lot going on in the ShopBot 3 and the ShopBot editor that gets overlooked a lot. And there's a lot of stuff in there. Just knowing how to maneuver the machine around and maintenance on the machine and editing the machine will really help you as an end user. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. And it's nice to install ShopBot software even on a computer that isn't hooked to a machine, because you can still go into preview mode down here and have the machine and have the software up on a machine in your house where there is no ShopBot even connected to it. And what this is here is a preview screen that would preview your file, and then you could just run a file. You could run a file here, set up your material, set up your toolpath, and actually preview it right here in 3D, just like you would normally do in PartWorks. So it's another way to come and do a check. So that gets looked over a lot. But right here we can just switch to preview mode. And most of us that are logged in today, we're all been ShopBot. But for anybody that's watching this video later on, when they see it recorded on our website, this is the main screen you'll be seeing when this is how you communicate with your ShopBot. It's called the command console, and this is the screen. You get the position window over here, which shows where your X, your Y, your Z position is. You have your inputs and outputs. You have some buttons we'll get into later, and where you actually execute the cut part. Over here is where you give the machine commands, and here's where the machine in blue is reading the commands, and they're actually going to start executing them as they're reading them, and it'll go through. And you'll see this as we start moving. Speeds. There's two speeds the machine can run at. It has a move speed and a jog speed. These are set up as inches per second. So when I say I can move my X or my Y 2, it's saying every second I'm moving 2 inches. So if you counted off 1001 while the machine's moving, it should have traveled 2 inches. So these can all be changed in here. You can change these to different numbers. So I recommend just leaving them where they're at from the factory until you get comfortable and knowing where you might want to change them for your project specific. So really, whether you have a desktop, a buddy, or a full-size gantry machine, this software is all the same. The only thing that is different is, the size of your table. So this desktop over here that I'm looking at, I can go 24 inches out in the X and 18 inches in the Y. So that's the only thing that's limiting me from the bigger machines. Those can go up to 4 foot by 8 foot. So the software is all the same. So all this stuff can get applied to all of our machines. So all right, let's get into the meat of it. So ShopBot console, and some things you're going to want to do is keep this up to date. Keep this up to date because they're always making changes to it, and keeping it up to date will help keep current versions. When I say it's nice to have current versions, because if there's bugs in the previous versions because of disconnects or whatever, and people have called in and said, hey, this isn't working, that stuff, when it gets fixed, it gets incorporated into newer ShopBot software. So to find out what version of ShopBot you're even using, you go over here to help and go down to the very last one, and it says help about. And this pops up and says, ShopBot control software, and it's showing right now that I'm using version 3.8.2 for all PRS ShopBots and PRT Alpha, PRT Standard, version 4G and later. So obviously some of the older ShopBots aren't going to allow this software, but anything that's a PRS, PRT, or PRT standard 4G or later, so anything in the last 7-8 years it's going to take. It's showing my port number that I'm connected to, showing my firmware, and everything's on there. So you can always download the latest versions of this software for free. All you have to do is come to shopbottools.com, go to the main page, and from our main page, this is where we would go to current software. Right here, the ShopBot control software. We're just getting into launching this ShopBot beta, which is what I have on there, and that's starting to go out now with all of the, computer is overloaded. That's starting to go out with the 3.8 here. The beta is starting to go out with all of our desktops right now. So this 3.6.4 will now become an older version. So that's where you get your updated software. Just help about, check your version number, 3.8.2. So right there, that's the most current version we have. While we're up in here, there's a few other things that are helpful in help. So the one thing I like to go to is there's two of the quick commands. And I have these printed out, and then I have them laminated, and I keep them right next to my machine. So the quick reference to command summary just brings up in a PDF reader. This is showing you just some of the quick commands. What move 3 axes, so versus going up into move, finding 3, and then typing them in, I just hit M3. So these are all quick shortcuts, and you'll see me using these today, and it would be nice for you to print them out and have them until you start memorizing them. So that's one, and then the other one that I like is called keyboard shortcuts. So this right here is to move things on the fly. So obviously K brings up your keypad. If you ever need to, while the part is running, you need to increase or decrease move speed on the fly. If you got to change the spindle speed, stuff like this you can do while it's in file. Now note, it's not going to save your partworks file with these settings. So I always recommend still, if you see it's not cutting quite right, stop it, go in and fix it, resave your toolpath and your file, and then come back out. But if it's something you got to fix on the fly, go ahead. Here's some of those key commands to get you through this. So there's a lot of stuff built right into this software that we, look, most of us come in here and we go file, part file load, and then run it. But there's a lot going on up top here. So again, you can come in here and look. There's quick links. I'll take you right to our website. If you click on this, it's going to bring up a browser. And it's going to take you to shopbottools.com. So just useful stuff in there. So good resources right here in the help menu. There's also a few of them over here in tools. So say this is the computer where you also do your designing on, and hey, I got to get into Partworks real quick to modify a file. I can just go TP and see the T how it has parentheses around it, and the P does. So versus me clicking on T and clicking on this, all I have to do from right here is hit T, P, and boom, it's going to bring up Partworks. And now I can go in and I can change my file. And while we're in here, one thing I wanted to point out, if you're drawing a file and you're going to send it right to your machine, when you save your files, notice right here you can go output direct to the machine. So as I click this and I was to click save, it's going to save that toolpath, and it's going to bring up ShopBot 3 and be ready to start cutting. So at that point, I hope you have zeroed your X and Y and Z because it's ready to cut. So be careful if you're doing this. So T, Partworks 3D. So and then tools. There's a few other things that are useful too that kind of get looked over. If you have a spindle with a RPM controller, this is where you would bring this up, and this is where the machine will come in and it'll automatically change RPMs for you versus you doing it. I do have to point out on the desktop, you do still have to manually change your BFD by hand. So there's a lot of things in here that you'll use. The one that is probably the most used that I use is the chip load calculator. And we have another training right on our webpage that spends the whole 2 hours on just using the chip load calculator. So, but that's where it is. Tools, and this is where I would go in and figure out if I'm using the right cutting speeds and the right cutting feeds to get the right chip load, chip rate, to make sure I'm not burning up my bits. So right now, if I wanted to get to the ShopBot site really quick to learn all about how to use this, this is a whole other training. I would go to help, ShopBot website. Bring up and that's where it's done and recorded. This is where it's going to go, is right on the same page. So I just go here, and I'm going to come down to training. And training tutorials and videos. And right here's one on tool database, common tool pathing drawing. So they're all right there inside. So that's that. Okay. So and then ShopBot setup is in here too, and we'll get into that one in a little bit. So just a few other things before we get moving the machine around. Sometimes you might switch a computer throughout your ShopBotting experience, or you've lost some settings, or something's happened. So say I just plugged this computer in, and I need to get it configured to this at a customer site, and we were doing training on a 96 by 48 machine standard. So now I got to come back and set this up so it is to my 24 by 18 desktop. So what I would do is I would come in here and I would actually do a utilities reset. So I'm going to reset this thing back to what it would be for like it came from the factory. However, before you do that on your computers, it's always a recommendation to do a utilities save settings in a custom setting file. Actually go in and save your settings to a custom file, and it'll go into settings and it'll save that custom file. We'll just call that custom TJ. So I'd have my settings just in case I came in here and screwed something up. I could always go back and load those settings. So I know I want to set this ShopBot 3 up so it matches this machine. And once it's set, it's set. So I would go to Utilities, and I would do a reset. And now it says, do you want to clear the ShopBot log? So thankfully I saved my stuff just in case I needed to come back. So yes, now I can clear it. Do you want to reload the default settings? Yes, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a reloaded desktop on here. Yes. And normal, if this is the first time, just click OK. So there's that custom TJ if I wanted to bring that up, but I don't. That's just a backup. I know I got to reset this, so I wanted to set it for a PRS desktop. So I got to come into PRS, and there's all your alpha tools. There's all the sizes. Here's all your standard tools and their sizes. You know, it'll say BT for a buddy, or PRS 96 by whatever for a gantry. Or it said ShopBot Desktop 2418 because that's the only model that we have. So I select that, and really nothing happened, but it just it reset itself internally. See over here, it changed my position to 00.25. We can see by looking over at the webcam that that spindle is not at 00.25. So we will get to that next on how do we find out where 00 is supposed to be at. But then another thing that you want to do is sometimes if you're still not being able to connect, is look in here to utilities, install control box firmware. Now that's another one that does get overlooked. So it would do that. I'm not going to reinstall. I just did this a minute ago, but just go in and follow these prompts, and that takes some the board back in the back of all your machines has some information stored on it, and that's just extracting it off your ShopBot and putting it onto your computer. So two good things to do when you're first hooking up. And the other thing to do that's really good is come in here and go to Utilities and go to Diagnostic Tools. The whole ShopBot runs off a USB cord from your computer, so I want to make sure I got some oomph in my USB cable. It's like the longer electrical cord you lose, you lose over distance. So that's what we're checking for here in the USB. So I'm going to do I would like to do a speed test. So right here it says first thing, ShopBot software must be closed. So let me go in the background and close. The power of reading things I've found over the last few years is really useful. I used to always like to just click and never read, what most of us do when we get something, throw out the instructions. If I can figure this out, I can put this together. So it's good to start reading. You see stuff like this. So ShopBot software must be closed. Enter the port number. I didn't see what mine was, so I'm just going to hit Find a ShopBot. I think I was on 3. Try that again. Sorry, if I get a few kickbacks on this, it's this computer is really trying its best to run a webcam, a web training, and be hooked up to a ShopBot all at once. So apologize if things come a little slow or doesn't quite go through right. So I think this is because I aborted the utilities reset, or the firmware. Okay, so let's go preview mode. And here's, I guess we'll do it after all. Maybe I hadn't done this. All right, disconnect router or spindle with safety switch, and make sure any powered accessories such as air drills are also disconnected. So I'll go over to my machine and I'm going to flip off the spindle like it says. As soon as I get done doing that, I hit check. It gives me my next step. Turn off power to control box. So I'm going to go over and flip the power off. So now I've shut the power off, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And after firmware downloader window appears, turn power on control box. So this has appeared. So I'm going to go back and turn it on. And now you see the little downloader going across. If you don't see your downloader come up, something it didn't take. So if you don't see the downloader come up, try it again. Sometimes you have to do it multiple times to make it take. So, okay, progress bar appears, it gives you all the instructions. Close this window, the firmware has completed, so close. So my machine's on now. I should be able to switch into move cut mode. And there's where I go into move cut. So what were we were doing a utilities, diagnostic tools, and I was doing a speed test. Find my ShopBot. It does not like this. Oh, that's right. I gotta shut the software down. Well, when in doubt, it fails during a training, right? Maybe the beta version is not working. So I will put a note here to our software guys that they need to fix the speed test. Anyways, you go in here. Let me open it back up so you can see it. You know I can't do it right now. You run your ShopBot, you run a communication test, and what you're looking for over here is a 70% or higher, meaning you're running at full speed. Your machine will operate less than 70%, however, it's just not up to full efficiency. So it maybe not moving as you might have it programmed to go 6 inches a second, but it's maybe only capable of going 5 inches a second because you don't have the full transmission efficiency. So make sure you got 70% or higher, and you'll be fine. All right. Apologize for that. That is a goofy error. I was waiting. It does not like all this stuff on. Okay. All right. So let's get into setting this guy up now. So what we have on all our machines, and let me bring this webcam up so you can see a little bit bigger screen, is proximity switches, which are built into the machine, and both the big ones and the little ones. The desktops and the buddies, they come fully assembled, but on the gantry machine, you have to assemble your own. And what these little limit switches are, I'll go and point at one. There's an electrical switch right there. There's one there, and there's one down in the corner of your 00. So these are switches that are built in, so when we do a homing routine, the machine knows how far it can go over, stop, records that measurement, comes back, tests it once more, double checks the measurement, keeps that measurement remembered, and then goes and checks the next one. That's how it knows to always go back to the same 00 location. Because right now it's thinking, it says that 00 is way out there. I know that's wrong. So how do I get the machine back to the proper 00? And that's where you come up here in the cuts mode. And we have two commands. We have a C3, which will home your X and your Y using proc switches. And then you have a C2, where you'll zero your Z axis with a zeroing plate. So we'll show you both here. So all I'm trying to do with these two commands is I'm trying to get this X, Y, and Z position over here that I'm reading. I'm trying to get that to be lined up with the tip of that bit. Because right now it's clearly not at 00.25. So I want the machine to figure out where 00 is for X, Y, and then I will manually do a Z. So with that being said, I go to cuts, I confirm there's nothing in the way on my machine, no clamps laying there or anything, a drill over here that I always leave, and a VFD knocks it onto the ground. So we're clear, obstruction free. I am now going to do a cuts 3. So here it is being read. I don't know if you heard the warning symbol. Now the machine will start moving. This comes over, touches it, moves back. So now it's found its X position. Notice that's 0. The Y, it's saying it's negative 11, 12, 14, boom. Now it says it's negative 5. Double checks it. There. Moves to 0, 0. So I'm now zeroed in the X and the Y. So if I move the tip of that spindle all the way down to the corner, the center of that bit is right at the corner of that spoil board. That's the way I have mine set up. The next thing I'd have to do is zero that bit in the Z. So for me to move that, I just want to bring up the keypad right now and show you the keypad. Some people don't even remember that we have this keypad. It's a great feature. So you can always hit the letter K, or you can come over here where this little yellow box is, and it's called the keypad, and bring this up. So here is our keypad. So notice with my mouse, I can click and hold these arrows and move this thing around in the X and the Y, and I can move it up and down in the Z. I can also use the arrow keys. Notice my mouse is over here in the middle, but I'm still moving it because I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard. Page up, page down, do your Z. Holding Control and the arrow keys makes it move at a faster rate. Notice there's a move. Now notice there's a jog. And that's just by holding my Control key. So keep that one in mind. These are all these little quick things. They're all in the help menu. If you go in there and read the shortcut keys, that's where they are. So also notice there's fixed. So if you click on fixed, you can change this number. So every time that you move, it moves just that amount. So right now, what if I change just to 1 inch? So every time I hit that, it moves over 1 inch. So all depends on how you have that set. I usually leave it about 0.01, because that way when I'm doing real small little measurements to get the Z just right, that's where the 0.01 comes nice. So we'll come back to this, but to show you now to finish the Z zeroing, I can either hit escape or I can hit the X up here and get out of this mode. So it doesn't matter where I'm at in my X and my Y. I like to be out in the middle of my spoil board like this. I can't do it right in the corner because I got this big long plate. So right here, I'm going to go into cuts and do Z 0 axis with 0 plate. And then look for the prompts. It says hit enter when above plate and are ready to 0. So I need to go over to the machine and do this. So I take my plate and I set it down on the table. Make sure you got all your dust and stuff off that. Whatever this is sitting on, it's going to have that distance underneath. So that plate needs to sit flat. This alligator clip needs to get clipped on. I always clip it right onto the collet nut. I can get a good clip on there. And what this is going to do, proximity switch, it's going to come down, touch, and come back up. Notice as I touch these together, let me double check on mine that it's working. Should be input 1. Sorry, I'm getting where I can see the screen. That should be a green light coming on every time I touch, because I've just made that connection. And that's just making and breaking that connection, memorizing that point. So is this okay to enter? Yes. So now it's going to plunge down, hit the Z plate, record it, come up and check it again, go down, verify, and record it. And now, there's the most important step. We're so close to cutting, we're getting excited. We go ahead and click OK without reading. Well, it's a good one to, and after you've done this 1,000 times, you don't read the stuff anymore, but it's good to know. Remember to remove alligator clip and put away. Because if you look at the webcam right now, if you didn't put the stuff away and you started using it, look at where my hand is. That is going to start spinning, and it's going to rip this cord right apart, and you'll call in and say, whoops. So make sure you remove both of those. Okay, then you can click away the error message. So that's okay. I don't know anybody in this group here today that would have done something like that would at least speak up and share it with the rest of us. I sure as heck have never done that. So now I know where my machine is. I'm at 0.5 distance from the end of that bit to the top of the spoil board. And my positions are out here. Let me bring up that keypad again, which I just hit K, so I can use my page up and page down, and the distance that it's showing over in the red is correct. If I was to take a ruler and measure these distances out, they would be exactly where it says. So that's what you need to do every time you turn your machine on, is do a C3 and a C2. Come into cuts, do your X and Y, and do your Z. It doesn't matter which one you do first, but always do it. I do it every time I turn my machine on. And I also recommend anybody that's in a school setting or a production setting where you don't know, maybe Frank was using the machine last, and he likes to take those settings and go crazy with them. So I want to go in there and do a C3 before I run it, because I might be using different settings than him. So always do the C3 whenever you run this machine, and then a C2 anytime you change a bit. So say I just ran project, say I just ran project A, and I used a 1/4 inch bit right there, and then I pull it off and I run project B. As long as I haven't lost position or changed bits, I don't need to redo the C3 or the C2. If I've changed bits, I obviously need to do a C2 again, because I put a new bit length in there, and the machine doesn't know the difference. But you shouldn't have to do that C3 again unless you crash your machine. So let me show you an example of crashing the machine. So what if I was to go, let me just bring the keypad up. We'll get into moves here in a little bit. If I crash my machine where I move this over here, and it starts doing that, I've obviously crashed my machine. Now watch when I push a little bit further how this X, it can't move anywhere physically, but look at the numbers moving. They're still moving on the machine. It's thinking that it's going. So that's what you get with the standard machine. It's saying right now that I'm at 24 inches, and I'm clearly in about 6 inches from that edge. So I've crashed my machine, I've lost position. Same thing can happen in the Z. See how it tells me that I'm still going up? I'm not really going up because the machine physically can't go up anymore, but I've now clearly lost that I need to re-zero. So a lot of guys will forget about doing this. So let's just do a C3, which is re-zero the X and Y. Dave asked a question, why does the machine turn off, lose its locations when you turn off the machine? Actually, the alpha machines do not. They do not lose. They do not lose position. I guess, am one of those guys that the whole measure twice, cut once sort of thing, and I don't trust who was using the machine last, so I always want to double check. Somebody could have went in there and put an offset in, so so the Z, the X and the Y are fixed, and obviously the Z is not. So here's another way to show you how to manually do the Z. So say you broke that Z0 plate, and it's going to be a week before you can get a new one sent to you. So bring up that keypad and move into a nice flat spot, and you can use your page down, get it down close, get it down real close like that, and this is where I would take the fixed position, and I'd put it at 0.01, And now if you look over at the web screen, at the camera, this is where I'll take a piece of paper and start wiggling underneath. And every time I wiggle, I'm hitting that page down once more, and it's only going down by 0.01. So as soon as I do and it hits, that's where I know that my bit is now touching that piece of paper. At that point, I would exit out of keypad and watch what happens here. I can go to 0, and when I hit this 0 z-axis, watch what it does over in the red box. Boom, it just makes that 0. So now it is at 0. So that's a way to make a temporary 0 height, is by doing it like that. And I will get into zeroing multiple axes in a little while. So notice I could do this. I could go 0, X and Y. So now it thinks that's 0 too. And there are going to be times where we need to do this. But we'll come back to that in a few minutes. So C3. Yeah, Gary, sometimes when you air cut, especially on a desktop, on any machine, depending on how thick your stuff, you get too high in that Z, it can throw you off there. So just know your C3 is always your go-to. All right. Another one that is useful is being able to just move the machine around, and we've done that so far with just the keypad. But we also, it's nice to know how to move it around to a specific number. So the keypad, just using arrows and moving it around. I also can want to be able to move my spindle into maybe a position out of the way, so I can move I want to nail my board or screw my board in right here. So how do I get the spindle, all the way over here out of the way? So this is where you can come to the move mode or the jog mode. They're really pretty much the same thing, except they're in different speeds. So again, move speed, jog speed. So I can go move X to, say, 12 inches. And that moves it over. So notice in the blue, or notice right here, it's saying command MX12. So that's what I did. I did move X, and then I gave it the number 12. So now what if I go jog X12? Where's it going to go from there? No place. It's already at 12. Okay? Everything is figured off the 0, 0 point right here. So if I was to go, if I wanted to get this spindle back to 0, 0 right here, and I type in move X -12, what's it going to do? It's going to try to go -12 inches. So everything is referenced off 0. So just remember that when you're giving it commands. So I just aired out something. Anybody's got any questions too, type them in. That's what we're here for. So it's thinking. Sorry, that's what this go-to. Everything going, it's mad at me. All right. So obviously I didn't lose position right there. I didn't change position. So did do something funky. So when in doubt, I always do a C3. Just to be safe. So what we're going to get into, I just wanted to show you, is you can either move or you can jog to a distance. And if it's something where you got clamps and stuff out in the middle of the table, you're going to want to stick with the move, the slower one. If you want to jog that thing out of the way real fast, go ahead. So like right now, let's get this thing out of the way so we could put a board up there. So what I would do is I'd come up here to jog, and I go 2 axes, X and Y, and now I just type it in. You type in the X first, separated by a comma, type in the Y. Jog 2418, hit enter. ShopBot computes it, and then it goes in a crow's fly. It always goes the shortest route to get there. So if you had a big fixture or something in the middle, That's not how you would have wanted to do it. You would have wanted to jog X first and then jog Y. But just so you know, you can always move. You can come in here and do this. I can go jog home, and it'll bring it right back to 0. And when you start memorizing the stuff on that shortcut key handout, or you do it enough, you won't even be using the pull-down menus. You'll just know that you can go, move to axes, 12, 12, and I know it's going to move it to 12, 12. Is the beta geared for Windows 8? I had a question. Yes, it is. Yeah, there are people successfully using Windows 8 and our ShopBot software. So, see, did I miss any other questions here? Yeah, please ask them. Please ask them. And we'll have a whole thing at the end too, where you can ask all kinds of questions. I think Zig asked me last week's training what I was having for dinner on the training, so we're a pretty open group. But so I'm at 12:12, and that's really it for the moves and the cuts. So I just wanted you to be able to see that you can move those and cut. Cut. You can always just move things and insert move Z. I want it up 2 inches, and move it up 2. It'll lift itself up. So all right. Yeah, Justin, we can get into that stuff at the end of the training. But keep moving on with this. All right. So right now, let me just do a jog home. So for most of us, we are going to be used to putting our material right here at jog home, at the 0, 0 spot, and doing most of our cutting right here. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we might have an instance where we have our material mounted in a different spot. I know, like on a 4-foot by 8-foot table, sometimes if I have multiple pieces, I'll have the first 4-foot by 4-foot used and then the second foot. Well, I can't go into my file and try to draw everything in its exact position, so sometimes I need to find temporary zeros out on the machine. So just to bring up Partworks here as a reference, just to help tie this all together. When we create a file, and here's our desktop, 24 by 18, and right now I've got my board right like this. I have it right exactly at 0, 0. So if you were to reference that drawing, if I drew that right at 0, 0, that's how I have it on this screen right here. I have that sitting right at 0, 0. So if this was something I was cutting out on the profile all the way around, that really wouldn't be good because I wouldn't get a good clean edge right here. That's where I want to have this, sit in a little ways. But what if sometimes you had a certain piece of material where, you needed this right, you wanted to cut it out here. What if I wanted, we're going to, for example, use this square. What if I wanted it right in the center of my material? I wanted to cut way out there. I'm not going to come into Partworks and redraw my file and recalculate it, have one here, have one there, wherever I'm cutting on my machine. I'm going to leave it right where I had it at 0, 0, and I'm going to bring it into my ShopBot, and I'm going to make my new 0, 0 out here. So what I'm going to do is I could either take a tape measure and measure the distance out, how far this is in the X and the Y, and locate that corner, or I could also just take the keypad and move it so it's directly over the top corner of that material. So if I knew, if I went and looked and had it lined up perfect, which is right above the corner of that material, and that's how I had it drawn at 0, 0, this is where I can now come in and make a temporary 0, 0. So I would exit out of keypad, and notice that I'm really at 10.926, but I want that to be 0, 0, because that's how I drew it. I drew it down in this bottom corner. So this is where I could go into 0 and go 0, 2 axes, which is X and Y. I click on this. That is now 0, 0. So now when I start cutting this, it's going to be actually cutting out on this board. If I wouldn't have hit Z2 and made them 0, it's going to come back and cut down in this bottom left corner, which is not where we wanted it at. So does anybody have any questions about that? So type them in there right now before I move on. I know that can be kind of tricky sometimes, but it's nice. Like I said, if I got a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet, you know, sometimes I'm doing cuts on this side, sometimes I'm doing cuts on that side. I can move them around. Sometimes you want to cut from the middle of your table. There's no right or wrong way. It's whatever works for you. Okay, so the first question is, how do you make sure that that piece is actually square to your table? Well, the way I would have had that done was I would have taken a tape measure, and I would have measured. I know that this is parallel to 0 right along the bottom, so I would have measured, you know, 3 inches up. Make sure it's 3 inches up on that side, and then same thing here, 6 inches in and 6 inches in, whatever it might be for your measurements. And I would have paralleled it off the edge of my spoil board. That's how I would have done that one. We'll get some questions about hold down. We'll get into hold down here towards the end. That's coming at the end. Keep things in sync. How do you 0 to a fixed 0 plate? Well, it all depends on how you have it built up. You know, ours fixed 0 plate on like an automatic tool changer. There'll be a plate that's, you know, mounted off to the side here, and then there's a way you can calculate the distance from the top of this plate to the distance from the top of this board, because every time you surface the board down, it's going to change that distance. So that's a setting in there you'd have to go in and do. How does this differ from an offset in material? Oh, it changed on me. How do you design different from an offset in material setup in Partworks? That an alternate? Yeah, okay. It's kind of the same thing. I believe what you're talking. We'll come back to that one. What if you have a very intricate part that has already been cut and you need to do some additional, sorry, the questions are going so crazy, I can't read them, and cut, you need to do some additional cutting to it. When you put it in the middle of the table, how can you guarantee that you accurately re-zero the X and Y, not just visually by eye? That's a tough one. It really is. That really is a tough one, because you've got, you know, you made this cut on this piece. Say you've got, like here's an example of one that we did in training where we cut this bowl out. And this was part of the 2D cut, was cutting this bowl. And then it came to the afternoon session where I wanted to do a 3D cut. So why not take the same bowl and put a 3D cut on the bottom of it? So what I did was I located my position exactly on this. I held it down with the hold down method, or whatever that was at the time, probably just some screws and some angled pieces of wood, and I just measured a distance up, got it exact, held it down, and I knew from 0, 0 where the center would be. That's just take some math and some calculating on your end. So it can be done. It is a pain. I'm not going to lie. That is a pain. I've had a lot of times where it doesn't always come out perfect like that. So, but if you can normally get it. All right, can you explain the setting for zeroing to a fixed? I can't on this one. I don't have it set up for that, Ralph. It might be something you'd have to call in here and talk to one of the guys that does the ATC stuff, the automatic tool changer, and they'll explain to you exactly how to set that up. I don't use a fixed plate, so I'm not the best guy to talk to about that. I cut some guide notches and a grid in the spoolboard, then use them as reference. Yeah, like Justin said, he does that. We got a guy here that he cuts a fence in his, so he has a 1/2-inch fence all the way around, so he can just nudge his part up to it. And then when he draws, he always draws in a 1/2 of an inch. So, so there's lots of different ways. There's so many different ways. Get on a forum. That's another one. You can go on there and ask these questions. These guys that are that are cutting 40 hours a week plus, and they know all the good tips and tricks. So, all right, good. We'll move on. Then I don't want to. We can come back to any of the stuff you guys want to do at the later time, but I wanted to keep going with this. So, and the one, I kind of stepped over this at the beginning. I should have. Anybody that has a spindle right here, a high-frequency spindle, the first thing that you really want to be doing is doing a C5. You want to do a spindle warm-up routine where it'll actually turn you turn your spindle on, and again on a desktop you have to manually change the RPMs, but on your bigger machines it'll cycle through some RPMs. What it's doing is, this is a several $1,000 spindle. It gets bigger. That is doing all the cutting for you, and the only thing that's keeping its internal parts cool is that little tiny fan up on top of it. So you're going to want to do a warm-up of the bearings before you apply a load to it. So I don't want to just come in here and start auging into this piece of bamboo that I have here that's really hard without warming up my spindle, because that's how I could wreck the bearings in it. So what I do is I come in here and I run my spindle warm-up routine. And you're just pretty much letting your spindle run for about 6-7 minutes, and it's throwing lube around on all the bearings and re-oiling them up before you put a pressure on. So always run a C5 for the first thing. Always run a C5 the first cut you do of the day. Before you even cut, just turn that on and run it. So do your C5 and then go and do your C3 and your C2. So I forgot to touch on that one. The guy was asking about the Z fixed plate. I believe they do that stuff in here. The CN72s and CN74s. That's where you want to call in and talk to Ryan or Frank. Those two guys will be able to help you with that. I apologize, I'm not. Okay, when you do have the warm team, how long does it take to cool off so that you should do it? That's a great question, Ralph. Well, I looked that up once, and they said once a day is all you need to do it. Unless you're running it all the time. After it sits for I forget what they said, 4 hours or 6 hours. It was 4 or 6 hours, maybe 4 to 6 hours. Then you'd want to rerun it again, unless you live in a really, really hot climate. Once it gets up there in 100 degrees out. It's going to stay warmer longer, obviously. So at home, I've been running a 2.2 spindle for almost 2 years now. I come in, if it's a Saturday, I'm going to cut. I'll come in about 8 in the morning. I'll do a C5, let my spindle warm up, do a C3, put the bit in that I'm going to use, and do a C2, and then I just go and cut all day. So, I might cut for a half hour and then spend an hour or two assembling and finishing and sanding and staining, and then come back and cut another one. So I never do it more than once a day. And if you forget to do it once, it's not the end of the world. But I just kind of go by. That was an expensive upgrade, and I really don't want to have to buy another one. So that's why I make sure you do that one. So All right. Let's see. What were some of the other things that I had? Okay. The one I wanted to do, we're actually going to do a cut here before we get into any hold downs, is first thing you do when you get these machines set up is you got to surface this table. So who knows, you know, if you go and buy a piece of MDF from Lowe's or your lumber yard, you know, this thickness of this MDF is going to vary throughout the material. It's not perfectly 0.75 all the way around. As the seasons change, humidity changes, the thing can warp with warped wood. So, you know, having a warped table, your machine's only going to cut as flat as your table is. So that's where you can come in and do a surfacing routine. And this is where I'll show you the preview mode and stuff as well. Okay, the question here is, how do you attach the MDF to the table? So on this machine here, we actually have an aluminum extrusion that you see underneath the wood. And in these aluminum extrusion is are slots. And then in these slots, let's see how close I can get to your camera. I don't know if you can see this real well. There's these little T-nuts you can get from Fastenal. And they slide right down inside there. It's a T-nut. And that slides in there, and it's just got a bolt run through it. All right, so for this, we want to do a table surfacing routine. So for this, I know what bit I'm already going to use. So I'm going to go do a bit change real quick. And this is important. We'll do a 2-for-1 here. Let me bring the keypad up, try to get this closer. Good angle for you. All right, so obviously I've got a spindle, and I want to do a bit change on it. Now we can do that. We're going to do a few things. We'll do the C2, we'll do the proper bit change, and then we'll start into surfacing a table. So I want to get the correct bit for the job. And what I'm using here is an on-screwed cutter. It's a 1 1/4 inch. It's just a spoil board cutter. It's for flattening the table out. So that's the bit I want to get in here. So for the spindle, I take my 2 wrenches. There's a groove on the shaft, and then there's a grooves on the collet nut. And I'm just going to bring these together, loosen it up. And this is where you want to watch. If you're a big gantry tool, you know, and you're doing this at the corner and it drops, it's going to drop down and hit the concrete and wreck the tip of your bit. And it could drop, and you know, you don't want it to pierce if you got a nice piece of material sitting there. A lot of guys do this mistake, so there might be a few you guys that are like, I know everything he's talking about already today. But here's one that a lot of people forget. If they're just using the same diameter bit, they'll just pull that one out and put the next one in. Well, if you got, anytime you got a collet like this, you want to pull the thing off and blow the sawdust out of it and pull it apart. So if you have a spindle, your collet is actually a spring collet. See how I just sprung that apart? These 2 pieces have to come apart here. And this is where you want to tap them out, blow them out with a little air, and get all the dust out of there. If you're not pulling these apart every time, you're going to wreck the spring inside this collet. So visually inspect them every once in a while. Make sure there isn't any little spots or chunks missing out of there. And to properly reinstall this, you have to spring that back together. That needs to be sprung in there so it doesn't fall out. And then you can put it back in with your bit. Do not, you know, some guys are not doing that, and then they're getting it stuck in here. So what will happen is they'll put just this piece in here and then jam this nut up in there, and it'll get stuck. Well, all I know is when people call in and say, I can't get my nut out of there, you know, that's not a good position to be in. So when you pull it off, blow it out, check them, get them back together. Obviously, a Porter cable router one isn't going to come apart, but these spindle ones all do. Okay, since we're going to be switching from a 1/4 inch, I got to switch up to a 1/2 inch. So I've taken that one apart. I've got this sprung back together, And this is where I'm going to start it. If the threads aren't going, give up. Check the threads. Don't force it. Don't ever force these with wrenches or anything. If they're not going, something's wrong. Step back. All right, so I got it started. The other thing, I'm sorry, before I get this on here, is how far this needs to go up. You don't want to bottom it out. If you bottom it out like that, it's going to break loose. Also, you don't want to stick it up too far up into this. You want it in there a good distance. If it's a smaller like this, you don't want to ever bring it down all the way where the flutes are into it, but you want to have it up enough so that you got it's about bottomed out there. You got enough material in there. You don't want these things coming loose on you. So, all right, I get it started, and I've got it in there. And this is the other key for tightening these. We're so used to trying to always tighten everything as tight as we can. We don't want it to come loose. The spring collet will actually hold it together. So there's my top wrench. And here they are, just snug. That's all I'm giving them. Is that just a little bit of oomph, just a little bit more, just secure it. I'm not trying to wrestle it in there tight. So now the bit's in there good and tight. So that's how you change the bit. And then you can move into your zeroing. All right, got a good question here. Tell us about why you should square the tabletop or spoil board. Well, one thing is humidity is going to come in there and change the thickness of it. It can alter. I know I've seen mine down here in North Carolina with the drastic temperature changes. I've seen it, hump up in the middle. So if I've got this humped board or humped table and I put my material on it to cut, it's only going to be as flat as the table, which could be not square anymore to the machine because it's bowed up. Or if you're a very avid cutter and you've cut your machine surface and got all that brown spoil board all just chewed up, you want to flatten it by what we're about to do. Get it to a nice down flat surface. So C2, Z0 plate. I even at home on mine, I've got an X. I took a Sharpie and made an X on my plate so that I always do it in the same exact spot. Now notice we're using an 1/8 inch thick plate here. The software compensates for this. When you do a C2, it knows you're using this plate and it knows how thick that plate is, so you don't need to go in and draw your files differently. So this is where I would hit OK, because I know that's right. Let me do keypad. So I know my Z is right. I'm going to put this on. It's a little foot, it magnets right on. That's for your dust collection. And just to be safe here, I'm going to do a C3 to get my zeros back. You might have an older one, Gary. I know they've only been doing these new feet for a couple of weeks now, or a month or two, so we can talk about that one at the end. All right, we're good. We got 0. We know our bit in there. What I'm going to do now is do a tabletop surfacer. Tools, table surfacer. So what we're going to do is create a file to surface our table. I'll tell you, this is kind of how I roll on my personal one, is come this spring when the the temps start changing and the humidity starts kicking in, I'm going to go ahead and resurface it, get it flat. Big 4-foot by 8-foot flat board is what I want up there. And then, throughout the summer and stuff, I don't cut a whole lot so it doesn't get chewed up too much. And then, as fall comes and the humidity goes away and it changes back, go ahead and resurface it. And I'm only taking off just a little bit, 0.03. Now that's only like the size of a, I don't know, like 2 or 3 business cards stacked up to each other, so it's not very thick. So here's where you could come in. All right, when you put a new spoil board, how do we make sure the edges are correct in the X and Y orientation? Well, you use your table drawings that come with the machine, and I'll also show you in here how to do ShopBot setup, so you can put it over yours. And you can also do a cutout afterwards. So there's a few different versions of that. We'll come back to that one. So you could go in here and type in your size. This spoil board that I have on there is exactly 24 by 18. But if it was 24 and a half, I just type that in. So I typed it in. I got 24 in the X. I got 18 in the Y. And then you got to type in just a few more parameters. How big a bit? Well, I said it was a 1 1/4 inch Onsrud. Let's have it go 0.03 deep. And then bit overlap. That's how far it's going to overlap itself. So this is called step over. And this is another thing that where do you get the surfacer from the menu? I went to Tools, and I went to Table Surfacer. So this is where as far as we get into bit overlap, that's a whole other thing we can get over. That's how far the bit's going to step over from the previous cut, how much of it's going to cut over. So 15% of what was previously cut, it's going to have the bit. That's just to help pick up the round corners. So another guy here saying his table surfacer does not come up, so he creates the file in Partworks. I actually created one in Partworks too, because I've created it and I've given it a lot faster move and cut speeds. So that's how I've done my good one at home, but this works just fine for what we're going to do. Okay, so where do you want the starting point? Down in the bottom left is your 0, 0. And right here you can click on this and it'll give you a text to talk about it. Answers all the questions that you might have. So I'm just going to say go ahead and make my surfacing file. Next you'll need to select a name for flattening the file and run it in preview. Are you ready? Yes. I'm ready. Are you ready? So surface top, let me just put this, it is going to put it in your SB parts, but I want to put it on my desktop so I can find it easy. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. It's going to switch me into preview mode. I no longer need the surfacer because I've created the file. And this is where it's showing you, just like we're used to doing in Partworks, it's showing you the 2D and the 3D. So here it's showing you the material. It's bringing it over, whatever material that you had. Again, some of the stuff is irrelevant for what we're doing. But then over here, there's your surface top, and it brings over that toolpath if you were to bring something in from Partworks. So right here, I could go and preview all cuts, and you have to select your bit. And it shows that it all got chopped off. So if you had like an actual project where it wasn't just surfacing it off, you'd see that as well. So that's how you can check a file in preview. You're done. You're ready to cut. We'll just switch it back to move cut. So I'd be ready to cut this file right now, and I'll go ahead and run it here for a sec. Let me go turn the vacuum on. All I'm using for a dust collector on this is the shop vac. So at home I've got a bigger actual dust collector, but right now I just have a a shop vac behind that wall. So here's where I would go File, Part File Load. I know I saved on the desktop. There's my Surface Top. And here we go. I'm ready to run it. So I would hit Start. And it's going to ask you for some prompts. Have you zeroed your cutter? Yes, we already did, but if we didn't, you would just type no. It'll have you bring up the keypad, and then you will go ahead and zero your Z. So if so, type Y. Yes, we've already done it. So I need to make sure my spindle is turned on. So if you have a alpha machine, this is where you need to hit the start button. For me, I just got up and walked over to my desktop. I had to physically turn the VFD on, the switch that's underneath it. And your router guys, make sure your router's, turned to the on position. I turn the spindle on. Now it's going to start making that cut. So hopefully you can hear me here still. So there's a machine working around the perimeter. And here's where we're going to see that step over in a second. Once it makes the pass, you'll see how it steps in. Now if you can see, there's a big circle right in the middle of my table. That's a circle somebody had cut in there. So while we surface it now, that's not only making the table flat, but it's getting rid of anybody's cuts in there. So you can't really see it real well because I got the dust foot on there. But watch it; it'll step in. See, it stepped in. Now it's going to keep going. And this is where I'm going to get up and go look. And I can verify that it's definitely down 0.03. I'm going to do a little camera work here, see if I can zoom in on it for you. So give me a sec. I don't know if you can see this. You can see the edge that it's leaving. I'll tell you what, 2 years now, plus, I still, a file like this is kind of boring to watch because it's just walking around, but to watch this machine in action, it's awesome. I love when you got just a really neat file with a bunch of pockets and curves and stuff, and then you're kind of standing back going, look at this machine doing all this for me. I did obviously all the design and got it all going, but for it to be able to follow like that and just cut the part out over and over again perfectly it's just amazing. So, all right. So what you see it doing right now is it's going around all 4 faces and bringing them in. You're able in the software to pick if you want it to pocket like that. You can have it do this. You can have it raster. You can pick how you want it to do. What I have at home for mine is set. I have it just going back and forth this way. I want to make it run quicker. So notice on this, it stops, comes forward, stops, come forward, stops, come forward. It's 4 different moves. Where if you don't have it stopping to go this way, I just have it going back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. It's a lot less stops. So on a full 4-foot by 8-foot sheet, it won't take as long. A surfacing, a standard surfacing table surfacer, what we just did, it's gonna get the job done. It's not efficient, but it's just us on the weekend sort of thing, no big deal. But I do it enough, and I do it enough on people's job sites that I had to create a file. So I actually went in and drew it. I actually went in and drew a partworks file for a 4-foot by 8-foot, and I dialed it in, got the feeds and speeds revved up really fast, and had the direction of the cut changed, so it's less stops and moves like that. So you can write a file like that too, but this works just fine. As you see, it's getting in, it's getting tighter, it's in the middle, it's just about to finish up. It'll lift itself up, and then it moves back to 0. So that was it. That's all there is to surfacing a table. So with what we've previously learned now, I know I want this out of the way so I can take a look at my table. I'm going to jog 2 axes, X and Y, and I'm just going to say 24, 18, and get that out of the way. Moves that out of the way. Now I can come and inspect my table. So how good but I can see passes with my lines for my passwords, and that's fine. You can see them. If you were to take your fingers like this and try to move them along, and it feels like you're running along a washboard where it's like dink, 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 along there like that, you might have your spindle out of whack. Mine cut great like this for about a year. Then I ran the spindle into a clamp, and it knocked my spindle a little crooked. So I had to come back in here and loosen up some bolts and fix that so it runs perfectly flat. You're never going to get it so you don't see any of the lines in there. You're going to see lines in the table, but you shouldn't be feeling a washboard on there, and that just means something's out of adjustment. So, and it happens. I doubt, I'll admit it, I've crashed my tool and knocked it out of square, but you don't have to. So that's simply surfacing a table. No different than if I was to have gone into Partworks and said, all right, I got right now I've got a 24 by 18. I could have just said, all right, I want to make this rectangle. I want it at 0, 0. I want it 24 by 18. And then came over and gave it a pocketing toolpath of 0.03 deep. Selected the spoil board. And then came down and said, here's what I was talking about, doing a raster versus the offset. We just cut an offset where it's doing all 4 corners. I have it at home where I do a raster. I have a spindle. It's an alpha, so I've got this, turned way up. It's probably cutting at 6 inches a second. So, so you come in and do that. So again, with a little pocket like this, you're not really going to see much on preview, but boom, what I cut off. So, any questions on that? That's a nice feature right there. Tools, table surfacer. So, all right, let me see any other little tricks that I forgot, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys. So I'm going to leave it at this. I'm going to go stop the video recording in the other room because I just wanted this for the gist of the basics ShopBot 3 software, and then we can get into some of the hold down stuff. So let me go kill this thing real quick. Give me 1 sec. I'll be right back.